The earliest reported sighting of Bigfoot or Sasquatch by an indigenous person was in 1811, when footprints were allegedly found. However, there is also evidence of Bigfoot in indigenous stories and pictographs. You have the painted rock pictographs located on the Tougal River Indian Reservation. These pictographs are around 1,000 years old and depict how hairy man or Sasquatch created people. The Chehalis Nation considered Sasquatch sacred and have passed down stories about Sasquatch, a shape-shifter that protects the land and people. The word Sasquatch comes from the mountain Sasquatch, where the Sasquatch are said to gather. Around 1929, J.W. Burns, an Indian agent and teacher who worked with the Chehalis Nation, published a collection of stories about wild men in British Columbia. One story was about a tribal member who encountered a hairy wild woman who could speak the Douglas First Nation language. Next, we talk about the story of the Ape Men in Ape Canyon near Mount St. Helens, Washington. There's about a group of gold prospectors who claim to have been attacked by ape-like creatures in 1924. In the summer of 1924, gold prospectors claimed to have been attacked by 7-foot-tall ape-like creatures in the wilderness. They said the creatures attacked them with boulders, and that one of the prospectors shot at one of the creatures, causing it to fall off a cliff. The prospectors also claim that the creatures returned later to attack their cabin with large stones. There was an investigation by the U.S. Forest Service Rangers. They investigated the story and found nothing. They concluded that the prospectors probably placed large stones near the cabin themselves to support their story. The aftermath was that despite the Rangers debunking, the story continued to spread and inspired new theories and claims of sightings. In 1983, William Halliday theorized that the attackers were actually kids from a local YMCA youth camp who were throwing rocks into the canyon. The gorge near Mount St. Helens, where the story is said to have taken place, is now known as Ape Canyon. We now move to 1958. A bulldozer operator was working in Northern California for a logging company. Jerry Crew was clearing away brush and stumps here in Bluff Creek, which is about 300 miles north of San Francisco, when he found enormous man-like footprints in the mud. Bewildered, he relayed the news and discovered his colleagues had also spotted huge tracks several times. News of their sighting was published in the local Humboldt Times. Giant footprints puzzle residents along Trinity River. October 5th, 1958 was the headline for the story, which contained the first recorded use of the name Bigfoot. The Sunday story went out over the news wires, and on Monday, Tuesday, for the rest of many days, Humboldt Times columnist Andrew Genzoil said, "We had reporters from all the wire services pounding on our doors." Now, the story at the time was questioned by some, but most had no idea what was happening in that part of the world. So, after Crew's co-worker, Ray Wallace, died at 84 in 2002, his children revealed a secret Wallace had concealed for decades. He made the prints by stomping in the mud with carved wooden feet. It was all just a joke. News of Wallace's hoax, however, barely registered with Bigfoot believers. There are other sightings around that time and after. May 27th, 1960, the San Francisco Chronicle had a story about, is a snowman fair game? Is the Abominable Snowman protected by California's Fish and Game Code? And around 1965, there was also another story about animal men of the Northwest. At this point in the history of Bigfoot sightings, there really hadn't been any real hard evidence. But things were about to change. We now get to actually see a Bigfoot for the first time ever with the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film. Here it is, unedited.
This next clip of the Patterson-Gimlin film, we can see the creature looking over its right shoulder. I zoomed in and slowed it down so we can see a little more detail. And I'll zoom in a little further, as you can see here as it's walking, looking over its shoulder. And it just continues at this point to walk away. I'll zoom in a little bit more so we can get a good idea what this creature looks like. And that concludes part 1 of the Bigfoot Timeline. For part 2, I want to get into more of the Patterson-Gimlin film, talking about if it's real, fake, because there are those who claim it was a hoax, that it's just a man in a suit. So for part 2, that's what we will discuss. Until then, keep looking for those unknown monsters.